Before I call the special meeting to order, I want to recognize a very wonderful guest that we have here today. Councilman Barlow's wife and two of his three children have joined us here in the audience. And so, Councilman, I don't know whether you want to run down there and hug them all, but I'd love if you would stand up. Mrs. Barlow, please. And mother-in-law Eleanor, please. Samira is his wife. Lauren and Rick, little one Ricky. And I understand Jaylun's in school. So we welcome you, and I understand from Councilman Coffin you did not, probably because you had so many children, weren't able to make the swearing in. So just want to welcome you today and hope that you have a glorious life. You have a very fine husband. We're very proud to work with him, and he's done so much for the overall city of Las Vegas, to say nothing of his ward. He is a devoted employee, and he's much beloved by everybody. So congratulations. Okay, so now if I can get rid of this wonderful mallet, never to use it. The March 28th, 2012 special meeting of the City Council is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. These, pardon me? Yes? Pardon me, I'm just trying to see next to Mr. Olivas. Do I? Who's hiding? There he is. I'd like everybody to welcome, soon to be sworn in next week, Councilman-to-be Bob Beers. We welcome you. And accompanied by his bodyguards. So please come in, have a seat, follow right along with the bouncing ball as we go through the process here. So moving right along, these proceedings are being presented live on KCLV Cable Channel 2 and are closed captioned for our hearing impaired viewers. Please note some customers of Cox Communications who do not have a cable box can view this meeting on digital channel 89.5. The special council meeting as well as other KCLV programming can be viewed on the internet at www.lasvegasnevada.gov. The proceedings will be rebroadcast Thursday at 1 p.m., Friday at 6 p.m., Saturday at 5 a.m., Sunday at 3 p.m., and Monday at 6 a.m. This building is protected by state-of-the-art fire detection and suppression sprinkler system. If alarms should activate during today's meeting, please evacuate using the exits at the back of the chambers out to the mezzanine. Proceed out the double doors to the terrace and down the back staircase. Once outside, assemble on the northeast corner across the street from City Hall at Lewis and First Street. Employees wearing safety vests or our city marshals will inform you when it's safe to re-enter the building. For public comment related to items on the agenda today, citizen participation and public hearing items, we have available a speaker card which you may complete and submit to the city clerk. Cards are available also online in the city clerk's office or at the rear of the chambers. If you do not submit a card, it does not prevent you from speaking under the public comment, citizens' participation, or specified public hearing items. If there's anyone present today who has a need for hearing impaired equipment, please see the city clerk staff. Before we proceed to the agenda and item 4, would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brian. He's asking Brian.
Beverly, in relation to the result of the canvass of the March 20th, 2012 City of Las Vegas Ward 2 Councilman special election, in the last sentence of the form that we sent out, it has special recall election. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
No, sir, this letter came from Larry Momax, our registrar of voters, so I'll have to have him make the correction and send me a new
Shouldn't
letter.
it be special election because
Yes.
it was not a recall?
It was not a recall.
So we want to make sure before we swear in the new councilman-elect, we want to make sure that the record reflect that it was a special election and not special recall election.
The actual returns behind the letter are correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we had that for the record.
Thank you, Councilman. So now moving on to item 4. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come to the podium, please, and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount any time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. The amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. All comments made will be cross-referenced to those specific items. If anyone submitted a speaker card or who wishes to speak under this portion of the agenda, please come to the podium and state your name for the record. Hearing none, we will move on to item 5.
Yeah, that can,
Are they okay down there? Okay. Okay, moving on to item 5, discussion for possible action regarding the certification of canvassed election returns for the March 20th, 2012 special Ward 2 election. Mrs. Bridges.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Beverly Bridges, City Clerk, for the record. The Clark County Register of Voters canvassed our returns for the March 20th, 2012 special Ward 2 election, comparing the ballots counted to the 49 election precincts used in that election. There was an active voter registration of 42,708 residents, of which 5,245 actually cast their ballots, which resulted in a 12.28% return for this election. There were no tabulation errors, making this 100% accurate election. The City of Las Vegas used vote centers again in this election like we did in the Ward 6. And that, again, I got some good feedback from the public that they enjoyed being able to only go to certain places to vote. I'd like to thank Larry Lomax and his staff. They made this a successful election. We had to jam it into 30 days, and they did a great job for us. I'd ask that the City Council accept and approve the canvass results for this 2012 special Ward 2 election as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bridges. Is there a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I will make a motion to certify the special Ward 2 election held on March 20th, 2012.
Thank you. There's a motion. Please vote. Please post. Motion carries. Congratulations. Till next week. Thank you very much, everyone. We will now move on to item number 6 for discussion for possible action regarding fiscal year 2012 and the tentative budget. Our city manager, Ms. Fretwell.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. I've invited Candace Falder up. She's going to be giving the lion's share of this presentation this afternoon, but I felt like I should give a couple of introductory remarks. You know, these last few years have been pretty tough, and the budget that we're presenting for your consideration today and deliberation today, I think really shows that we have been able to sustain ourselves very well over the course of this recession. We've been able to sustain adequate reserves during that period of time, and I feel like we're stabilizing. We're not totally through all of this. Our revenue recovery is not as robust as all of us would love to see happen, but at least they're not dropping like they once were, which required quick, decisive responses. And we took those actions as needed along the way. Today, the budget that we'll be presenting to you is a relatively flat budget, So it doesn't include additional cuts to our service levels. In fact, it allows us to, in a small way, a minimal way, begin to build back in a couple of areas that you've identified are key to you in our strategic plan and service delivery to our community. It's allowing us to redeploy some of the reserves that we've been able to sustain over the last few years back into supporting service levels that I know you all aspire to see us have, but also into much-needed capital improvement projects around town and some program areas that are critically important to you. I feel like this is a very solid budget plan. It's not one that comes to you that requests that we go back and ask for concessions from our employees. They've already done that, and they've done that in an incredible way that's helped us have this turnaround happen for us. Had we not had those kinds of concessions, those kinds of reorganizations, those kinds of cost containment that we've become very good at over the last few years, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. We'd be talking about cutting again. We would not be having probably a very pleasant budget conversation, or one that's a little easier to have, considering where things could have been had we not taken that swift action early. And I think, we really owe a debt of gratitude to each of you. There's a few new faces on this panel, but all of you have stood fast in seeing through your vision and wanting to make sure that we have basically a comprehensive fiscal stewardship that's sustainable long-term and still delivers top-notch service to our citizens, and that we're there when they need us most, where we focus on public safety, where we focus on making sure that the infrastructure that we've invested heavily in is taken care of well, that our parks are safe to play in, that we have talented employees that deliver the best service we can possibly deliver. Those are the things that are reinforced in this budget today. It reinforces your strategic priorities that you just updated. I'm very proud that we're in the spot that we're in. We do have some things we'll have to focus on in the coming years, but we're kind of used to that. And we've learned to manage through deficit budgets. We've learned to cost contain and dial things back when we need to mid-year. We've learned to have, I think, very good conversations with our union leadership to work together towards resolutions to stabilize our city. And we will continue to use those tools and those relationships and those understandings to make that happen so that we continue to deliver the best services we can to the city. And I just want you to know that we're looking forward to this conversation today to make sure that we're on the right track. We tried to address your strategic priorities, and that's the way we've oriented this presentation today, as well as to give you a brief synopsis of some of our historical perspectives. And we await your direction, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. Candy, I know, is prepared to deliver a really great presentation today. And I thank you for all your hard work and your staff's hard work in putting this budget together, and all the department heads who have been working diligently to put together a plan that will work for us next year and getting the job done for you and our community. So thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to introduce this item. And Candace, I'll turn it over to you to go through the presentation.
Good afternoon. Candace Falder, Director of Finance. Excuse me. I want to echo a little bit first of what Betsy said. The budget we're presenting to you today is pretty much a culmination of several months' worth of hard work across all departments in the city, excellent finance staff that we have, the city manager's office, and you as a city council of setting the priorities with which we could use as a framework to develop this budget we're presenting. First thing I want to present is the schedule of what we'll see in the next couple months. What we've had is, in addition to this workshop, the city manager's office and Mark Vincent have scheduled several meetings at the city council to go over some of the things that impact our budgets this year and in the future. So on April 4th, you will hear a discussion on unfunded liabilities. We'll file the tentative budget after the guidance we received today from you on April 15th. We'll have briefings from Public Employees Retirement System, Dana Bilyeu, the executive officer, on the 16th and 17th, meeting with you as a city council and with the leaders of our collective bargaining units. April 18th, there's a report on federal funding deficiencies that Mark will provide. April 30th and May 1st, we'll brief on alternative service deliveries and options available to the city. We'll have a budget hearing for your final guidance excuse me, on May 15th. This date is a date certain set by statute, and then we'll file the final budget with the state on June 1st. The objectives that we used in building this budget was to avoid service reductions. We targeted some areas for some minor restorations. As Mark said, it's a relatively flat budget plan. We're going to utilize some of our reserves to accomplish the stabilization of our employee benefits fund, to fund some preventative repairs and infrastructure projects, and retire general obligation debt. We have successfully managed through deficit budgets the last several years, and we're going to show you how we plan to do that this coming year. And the main focus, again, is this budget is in support, thank you, is in support of the City Council strategic priorities that you've adopted. Those priorities being the 6 that you see here on the screen: thriving and sustainable business community, safe and healthy city, comprehensive fiscal stewardship, community pride, excellent customer service, and organizational excellence. A little background on the last 2 years. As Betsy stated, we make sound fiscal decisions while we've been facing deficits over the last several years. We've done conservative spending and we've been underrunning our expenditures. The last 3 years, we've actually brought you a deficit budget that you've adopted, and the city and its staff has worked very hard and turned that round into an operating surplus in 3 of those years. That we've then been able to take some of that money, increase our fund balance slightly, and use it for some one-time expenditures in capital projects area. We've been able to retain our bond rating, physically sound despite sagging economy and revenues. That's what we see the city as now. A little trending on our revenue and expenditures. The bars represent the expenditures since 2007 through this budget that we're presenting today, and the green line is the operating revenues. As you can see, in the earlies, in the 7s and 08, we had a surplus. Our revenues exceeded our expenditures. Then we tended to break even as we started the dip down, and then 10, 11, 12, and 13, we've had to rely a little bit on our fund balance or reserves to balance the budget. The 13 financial picture. What we see here, our main revenue source is C-Tax, and it represents 84 to 85%, 84 or 85% of the C-Tax is the sales tax. It is our major revenue source. The second one is property tax. We're projecting a 4.6% increase in consolidated tax, while property tax is decreasing 10%. That C-Tax increase dollar-wise is going to offset what we're seeing in the decline in property tax, so they're equaling out. Budget levels, they're going to remain flat. We have a less than 1% increase in this budget. We're going to maintain, at the end of this period, we're projecting a fund balance at 18%, which is above our policy, which is stated at 12%. The next few slides want to go through the strategic priorities and how we're going to support those through the operations budget. The first one is safe and healthy cities. We're going to budget the fire department. We're going to provide funding to prevent scheduled brownouts while we add new stations. Yes,
Candace,
Councilman.
if I may, through you, Mayor, if we may digress just for a second in relation to the property tax decreasing by 10% on the previous slide.
Yes.
How does this, Candace, if you can explain to me, how does this work in relation to the state statute where as the property tax decreases, and I'm not
The
sure.
cap?
With the 3% cap for residential, and I believe it's an 8% cap for commercial?
Commercial, yes, sir.
How does this work in relation to the city of Las Vegas being able to get back to where we once were, or at least as close as possible to where we once were, with only a 3%, our abilities to only increase by 3% moving forward?
Let me address it this way. As the tax has gone down, those ratepayers cannot exceed more than 3% of the prior year. Mark will correct me if I'm wrong. If they're going down, their rate is applied to that lower assessed value. That compared to the previous year, some of the property tax bills will rise a little more, but they won't touch up against that ceiling. As we see right now, the projections we've gotten from the state on the property tax they are forecasting a decline of 6%. We're being a little more conservative because that does not include the appeals. So we're basing another 4% decline based on the appeals, the trending that we've seen in the past years, and that's why we're putting a decrease of 10% in this budget.
Mayor, if I may, Mark,
Yes, Mr. Vincent, please.
I think what it's a strong mic. I think what I heard Councilman Barlow ask is how is that cap going to manifest itself into the future? And the reality is, even if we were to rebound to the same assessed value levels, it's going to take anywhere from 10 to 12 years to get back to that level. The only thing that's going to save us is if there's new development. New development, when it comes on the tax rolls, is not subject to that cap in the year it comes on the rolls. So to your question, it will take much longer for the property tax to recover without any new development.
Thank you. Anyone else here? Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, can you elaborate a little bit more on growth and the future needs of the city in regards to that property tax and the direction that financially for us to get to that point again? Give some specifics in regards to growth, residential, commercial.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Councilman, but in the sense of we've lost, I think, close to 40% of our assessed value, I think something like that. And so even if the market starts to adjust itself at some level, your residential property, which is about 80% of our value is residential, if it's owner-occupied, and a lot of our residential is not owner-occupied, it's rental property now. Rental property is capped at the 8% rate, which is not a pure 8% rate. It also has some CPI limitations in it. So the issue is that as even if our real estate market started to grow faster than 3%, we're not going to see faster than 3% growth on the residential side. We won't see faster than the 6 to 8% on the commercial side either, unless there is new construction or new development. And that's the issue we see right now. There's not much happening on the house. There's a little blip. We were talking about it this morning. There's a little artificial blip in housing right now, probably because it's the way the demands are working out and what's happening with the foreclosure process and those homes getting back on the market. But we believe it's going to be a slow ride back.
And Mayor, if I may, Mr. Vincent, the reason I asked that, and you're not understanding, is I wanted you to be more clear in regards to we need growth and construction. We need this city to continue to grow, and we need to be focused on not only the downtown, but of course the outlying areas, whether it's commercial construction, residential construction, growth and development, continuing to diversify this economy. So you answered my question.
Well, I actually have a better answer now that I understand your question. I can tell you that probably the first 7 years of my employment here at the city, the average growth in our property taxes was hovering right around 10%. That was not valuation growth, that was development. Valuation growth probably was in the 2.5% to 3% range, because remember we have a depreciation on improvements here. So we were seeing 6-7% growth in our taxable revenues just from new development. So it's really quite a different position we're in today.
And just as a follow-up, and thank you, Mark, for that clarification. What I'm trying to find out is how much of an impact to our budget would we be looking at in relation to that 3% cap now? Because if in fact we were in the double digits before and now dropped down into the single digits, for example, to 6% hypothetically speaking, and then the economy moves back into the double digit, well, we can only move up to that 9% cap from a 6%. Would that be a fair statement, Mr. Vincent?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. For every 1% growth or every 1% change in property tax revenues, we're talking about $850,000 roughly. So a few percentage points is a couple, $1.5 million, so on and so forth.
Thank you. I mean, I think those questions are really important because obviously it does go back to our bringing in new business and building residential, and we'll get there. I'm confident. Candace, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, while we're back on this slide, let's talk about these differences too. We talked about development growth. Development growth is going to impact both of these major revenue sources. What we're seeing now with the uptick in the C tax, it's primarily because of tourism. Tourism's gone up. Those are not local dollars that are driving that up. It's the sales tax portion. It's not construction. And as we see, what we desperately need is some of that development. It will then impact the property tax revenue base and the C tax base as they buy their materials and supplies. So back to safe and healthy cities. This one, we talked about, we had funded fire and rescue to prevent scheduled brownouts while we've added new stations. We're going to maintaining response times and critical care for fire and rescue with the addition of a new EMS unit being deployed at Station 107. We will restore animal control hours from the 38-hour work week to a 40-hour work week. We're going to enhance criminal justice activities by supporting some specialty court advocates. We currently have several specialty court advocates that are paid through grant funding. Those grants will not pay the benefits associated with those personnel. They will only pay the direct wage piece, so we will pick up the benefits portion of those as a match. The next one is Community Pride, and under Community Pride we are enhancing before and after school programs for the youth. We're going to advance literacy efforts in a partnership with the Clark County School District, and we're adding 4 part-time positions to bring back cleaning parks on the weekends so that residents can have cleaner area to play with their families. Under comprehensive stewardship, we've put a small placeholder in for rewarding outstanding performance of our employees. What we've done here is for the executive and appointive staff, we've put approximately $300,000 in the budget for the city manager to work on a pay per performance one-time bonuses based on some completion of that performance. With that, the program has not been fully solidified, but it's focused on the appointive and executive group who has not seen any pay adjustments, most of them for 5 years. So we feel that that's a very small pot to place in this budget.
What is the percentage overall of that?
Well, that coupled with the second pot that we've put in, we've put another $1 million aside for an overall city employee pay for performance plan that we are using as an incentive for those bargaining units to come to the table to negotiate a pay per performance structure. That 1.3 in total that we've put in the budget is less than 0.5% of our overall employment cost here at the city.
Less than, again, would you repeat that, please?
0.5%.
Thank you very much.
It's a very small pot, but we really think that we have started working with our executive staff in working towards a performance-based reward system. And we'd like to put that out there and offer it to all of our units if they're willing to come and negotiate to move in that direction. These steps and COLAs will restore. We have a modest increase in this budget for the CEA. Their steps will start again January 1st of 2013, and their COLA then will be reinstated in July based on the current contract. Under organizational excellence, we've funded so that we can further invest in organizational development and training And with that in mind, we have had a partnership with the CSN for higher education for our city staff. What we're doing there is we have partnered with CSN to provide the training that typically we would have outsourced somewhere else or done in-house with staff. We now have a new organizational development manager on board, but the rest of the staff that we used to have through turnover is not there. This way, we think we can partnership. Other entities can benefit also as we move forward, and move in a positive direction, all of us together with CSN's support.
Excuse me one second.
Your Honor.
Yes, please, Councilman Coffin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Candace, I think you're making the right decision here. Management is using CSN's facilities because this is one of their main missions, real-world training. What I'm thinking is we might want to just take a look at UNLV, too, for certain aspects of professional management training. There's things that they do that, that really can fit our needs. And I didn't think about this the first time I saw this, and now that it occurs to me, UNLV would be pretty upset if we didn't give them a shot at some of this, and it wouldn't make sense to me. I mean, I don't know if it fits your plan, because it depends on the occupational instruction that you need, that kind of thing.
Thank you for the input. We'll
But it could
meet
be-
with our
could be.
organizational
Thanks,
development
Your Honor.
manager and consider those options.
Thank you.
Under thriving and sustainable community development, let me back up. We've now moved from priorities that are going to support through operations, that as you see now, we're going to support our strategic priorities with capital programs and reserves in this budget. Under the priority thriving and sustainable business community, we have put some money in this budget for small business incentive program and some seed money or startup for a new RDA. Under
Excuse me,
safety.
is that
Yes.
a new RDA, meaning the...
This is a new RDA area. I believe it's in Ward 1. And
It's generally around the corridors of Charleston, Sahara, Valley View, and Decatur are the current areas that are under consideration, and it's something that will be considered by council at the next meeting of the RDA on the 4th.
Okay, and that's an expanded, it's an expanded RDA?
It's a new
Expanding.
RDA area.
Thank you.
Candace,
yes, sir.
just for clarification, when you say new RDA, just so that I'm clear, it's in addition to the current RDA?
Yes,
or is
it's in
it
addition to the
expansion of the
RD
current
area.
RDA?
Expansion of the current. It's in the same entity of our redevelopment agency.
Let
It's
me-
expansion in area.
Let me clarify.
Because-
There are two things that are underway. The expansion of the existing RDA area that was established in 1986 and has been amended several times over the last 2 decades.
Correct.
This would be a new area initiated along those corridors that I just mentioned, Charleston, Sahara, Valley View, and Decatur. So this would be a set aside in funding to help with the initiation costs of that new RDA area as the council completes the process of establishing it and defining the area. We'll give them some startup money to be able to incentivize projects in that area in the first year of its existence.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. So the additional question then becomes the comparison as far as why not include this area within the current as far as the expansion versus starting the new?
Well, maybe we should take a step back, because this is really more of a budget discussion about putting aside some funds to be able to start that new area up. You all will have a different conversation adequately posted for it to talk about the creation of a new RDA area. And at that time, Councilman, that would be when we would talk about expansion versus new. And there have been some discussions of that over the last probably 2 years, going on
Right.
2 years now.
Right.
There are expansion areas that are being evaluated to the current RDA areas, and there is a new area that's being defined, and we're going through all of the blight studies and all of the requirements under NRS 279 to make sure we meet all that criteria before a new area could be established. It'll be council's decision whether you establish the area or not.
Right, but that's a very good point, but I'm trying to understand how is it that we're in essence, if that's the case, then we're putting the cart before the horse in relation to being asked to approve monies for a new RDA.
Well, this budget has to be filed before you will be complete in your deliberation on the creation of the new RDA area. And if we don't do it in this budget, then you'd have to wait a whole year to be able to do that. So
Understand.
we wouldn't be spending any of this money unless there's a new RDA. You all would be able to redirect it to another project, for instance, if you didn't create it.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
it does.
So we're trying to plan for what may be the ultimate decision of the council to create that new RDA area to get it started.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem wanted to make a comment.
Thank you, but that's what I was going to make clear. This is a tentative budget, so this amount is tentative in case we approve the new RDA, correct? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And how much, so you've explained that, so how much money is involved here? What's the set aside for this?
We placed $1 million on each of these lines.
1 million? Okay. And then we will be discussing this particular new RDA in April? Is that what you said?
You actually have an item on the April 4th RDA agenda to discuss this matter, not the funding, but the issue of the new RDA area. And there will be subsequent actions that will be required of the board that will actually take us, I believe, into, I hope the councilwoman doesn't throw something at my head, but I think it's August before we would be finished with that process. So if we set aside the funds in the tentative budget and then those funds stay in the final budget, they'd be set aside for that purpose. If you didn't create the RDA, then those funds could be redirected at that time to another project, or they'd just sit and wait for the next budget cycle for us to redirect to another project.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you. Councilwoman.
I just wanted to add for Councilman Barlow that we've worked on this for over 2 years, and we really investigated thoroughly the idea of having a separate RDA or mixing it with the current RDA. And because primarily the new RDA would be in the ward I represent, it didn't matter to me which way we went, but it seemed that all factors made it better going in this direction. And I think that'll probably come out as we specifically suggested. I just wanted to let you know we really have looked into it the last 2.5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Candace.
Thank you for that clarification. We will also use capital funds and reserves for safe and healthy city priority. Under this, we have the main commerce one-way couplet. We have some street safety enhancements for vehicular accidents, and we have safety enhancements for pedestrians and bicyclists. We'll fund annual traffic improvements and some facility rehabilitation for detention and enforcement. Under comprehensive fiscal stewardship, again, we've placed the funds in there to stabilize the benefit fund. We're going to retire outstanding debt, the Neonopolis garage. That will ease our debt obligation for the next few years. That debt was originally scheduled to go out until 2019. And this way, if we pay it off in 2013, we'll free up $2.5 million each of the next 7 years to pay that.
Candace, through you, Mayor.
Yes.
I know that a question came up from one of the council members in relation to the question being asked, I believe it was you, Mayor, that asked what was the number as far as the cost if in fact we allowed the debt payment of the Neonopolis garage to run its course. What cost would that be versus paying it off early? And I'm not sure if she received that information. I didn't receive it, but I would like to know if in fact that information is available so that we can
Yes,
make
it
a
is. I have
determination
that
as to
here.
whether or not it's best for us to pay it off now or allow it to run its course. So can you
Yes.
elaborate
As
or
I said,
speak to
this
that?
debt is due to run its course in June of 2019. And if we pay it off, we would save over $2.5 million in interest over the term by paying it off early. So not only does it save our $2.5 million each year for debt service, but we will not have to pay that $2.5 million in interest that we would accrue for the next 7
Plus,
years.
it gives you a piece of property that you can,
Do something with.
Something
Right
with
now,
or
it's funded
sell.
by public debt, and it's not as flexible as we could be, as if we paid it off, it would be an asset that we would have several options for.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Coffin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Candace, I know you probably have in your hip pocket one of these, the magical ability to pull stuff out if a question's asked. And this might be a good time to tell us, give us a picture of the full debt, how much we have and roughly how long we have to retire some of it.
Okay, bear with me for a minute. Mark has provided me. The debt comparison, this is for several entities within the state of Nevada. We've highlighted Las Vegas. We currently are sitting at $642 million in general obligation debt. As you could see, we have capacity. We are definitely much lower than most of the entities. We have capacity, as Mark always says, to issue debt. The rub ends up being, if you take out the debt, you have to repay the debt. So if you want to allocate resources from current operations of what's available for what we have in operations now to issue debt for some projects, the capacity is there, but you have to remember, then we would have to increase our debt service out of our current budget to pay those obligations.
Candy, if I may.
Please do.
I was just going to follow up a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
If I may.
Mr. Vinson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This slide, this table hasn't been updated since prior to issuing the debt for the new city hall. So it had a placeholder in it. If you look at the footnote, you can't probably read it very clearly, but we had a placeholder, $250 million on the city hall debt, and if you recall, we only issued, I think, $183 million of debt. So if you make those fine adjustments, the per capita debt service drops from $1,088 to $978, and the percent of assessed value drops from 2.57% to 2.31. Now, the other information is not up to date, but just again what Candy said, when you compare our debt load to a city like Henderson or North Las Vegas or Carson City, we have a very low debt load. In fact, our debt service typically is substantially less than 5% of our general fund budget. It's historically been 1.5%, 2%. Obviously, as the city hall comes on, that'll be closer to 3.5%. We do have capacity to issue a lot of debt, and our debt load is low. But anytime you issue debt, as Candy points out, you got to pay it back. You got to have the capacity to pay it back.
One further question on this: where's our redevelopment debt?
The redevelopment debt is not reflected here because redevelopment debt's not GO debt. It's revenue debt secured solely by the revenue from the tax increment. It has no general obligation debt.
We were dinged a small amount by the Moody's or Standard & Poor's on our redevelopment debt just recently.
Yes, we did.
Will that reflect at all on our GO debt?
I don't believe it will at all. In fact, we'll find out here shortly because we had to go out to get new ratings for the F Street reopening bonds, and so we'll find out. But there were absolutely no questions, and when we had those rating interviews, there was absolutely no questions about the redevelopment agency.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Mayor, if I might just jump in really quickly.
Please.
Just to kind of harken back to some of the earlier slides that Candy indicated, the goals in this budget. One of the things that we're really trying to accomplish here is to create additional stability. And one of the ways that we do that is by retiring some of the debt. So when we're talking about this, the goal is to basically create better cash flow for us going forward and better, less debt as we go forward over the next 7 years. Now, the council, as Candy said and Mark said, could make a decision that you want to do additional projects and take on additional debt. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is actually retiring debt so that you would then be able to see a better improvement between our operating costs and our revenues that are coming in, so that you see less of that going out for debt purposes alone. So I hope that helps clarify what we're trying to accomplish here. We're kind of down in the details about, selling, paying off the garage debt, but the point is that this is a much bigger issue to stabilize our debt service fund.
Any, Councilman Coffin, anything further on that question?
I think it's, thank you. I think it's, well, we don't see that slide anymore, but I think it shows we're pretty healthy compared to the other major cities of Nevada, which I think we hear a lot about North Las Vegas, and but we don't hear Carson City, when their debt is extraordinary. I didn't realize it was that bad. And we're considerably better than the county, although they have different service funds that might have been included. Reno, we hear, is almost always close to being broke, but their geodebt is much lower per capita. I don't know why they seem to be in such difficulty. Maybe it's just in their operating budgets and not in their ability to cover their debt. That's all I can figure.
Yeah, I can't.
Well, thank you for being able to bring this up, though, today on
You
short
can
notice.
thank Mark for this slide.
Thank you, ma'am. Mayor.
Please continue.
Let's go back. I have one last slide under Community Pride. In this budget, we are transferring the Fifth Street School operations to Cultural Affairs. It was currently under Business Development, and we'll have a phased reimbursement to the RDA for the improvements to that facility. We will also fund some artificial turf installation and replacements, and funding for walkable and bikeable communities. The last slide on the reserves, I want to show that we are planning to put $25 million of our reserves into capital projects, and $13.5 million is the retirement of the Neonopolis debt that we just spoke about. That will both be drawn from the Fiscal Stabilization Fund. We have $50 million in the Fiscal Stabilization Fund. We draw these two items down, that will leave us a balance in fiscal stabilization of $11.5 million. That, coupled with the traditional general fund balance that we'll have, will leave us about an 18% of our general fund expenditures as a fund balance. Under GASB 54, commonly called the new fund balance, pardon?
Would you explain
Councilman
GASB
Ross?
for our audience?
Thank you. Government Accounting Standards Board, pronouncement number 54, was the definition of the new fund balance. We had to go through and evaluate each of our funds and how they receive their money and whether they meet the definition under that pronouncement to be a separate fund. In several instances, we have some special revenue funds that didn't meet the clear definition of a special revenue fund. They did not have a unique specific revenue source. So those had to be rolled into, for reporting purposes, into our general fund. One of those was the Fiscal Stabilization Fund. Because it doesn't have its own unique ongoing revenue source, it appears to be just like the general fund. So we report it as an addition to the general fund. So when we add those two together at the end of this budget, we will have an 18% ending fund balance with those consolidated fund balances.
Councilman Ross?
Thank you, Mayor. This is, I guess in a sense, this is one-time money anyway. We couldn't use this for anything ongoing.
Correct. It's not a replenishable source.
And I'm glad you brought that up and pointed that out. So it's important that everybody understand that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may also again,
Yes, please.
I think it's also important to realize where this stabilization fund got created from. It got created from primarily capital projects that we stopped or delayed and repurposed those funds for the stabilization. We're actually, in many respects, putting the money back now from whence it came. One-time money.
Thank you.
This slide, I know this council has seen several times. What we're presenting to you here is 3 columns with fiscal year 12, our current projection of what we'll end this fiscal year with. As you see, we will have a shortfall of $4.6 million. That is pretty close to what this council had budgeted. We will have an ending fund balance consolidated with fiscal stabilization of $132 million, 28.7%. Thus why we decided we needed to do some of those infrastructure projects and one-time items using that fund balance. So for fiscal year 13, we're presenting to you a tentative budget that has $454 million in revenues, $464 million in planned expenditures, leaving a shortfall, an operating shortfall of $10 million. That will draw down the fund balance for the capital projects that we spoke of and the Neonopolis debt. That'll leave $83 million. We'll still be at an 18% fund balance as it relates to expenditures in the general fund. I do want to say that, a reminder that this council has adopted deficit budgets the last several years, and we've managed to come in with less of a gap than you had adopted. The city team, all the members of the city have worked very hard to keep the costs down, and we really are looking forward to try to do that again in fiscal year 13. And that's very important as we look to the next column, because on the forecast, you see, we're only showing a 2.1% growth in revenue. We're showing a 5.8% growth in expenditures, and we would have almost a $28 million gap. That's driven by three main items. It's Metro. Metro will grow from $122 million to $133 million. We have the phased in of the fringe benefit rate. It will be the third year of the phase-in of that allocation to reconcile that fund. And the third item that we have is the City Hall debt. The City Hall debt steps up to $11 million that year. So that's what drives the $28 million. Again, the CEA steps and COLA reinitiate partially in 13 and then fully in 14. But I do want to caution you, none of these, 13 or 14, includes any increases for any other negotiated increase to bargaining contracts as we move forward. We don't make a practice of guessing what the outcomes of those negotiations might be, but we're very cautious and watch them as they go through. So if we see any large increases in any of those contracts, that will impact these fund balances. And you could see in 14 we're projecting that we would be at an 11% fund balance, and our current budget policy is at 12%.
Question, please, Councilman.
I don't have a question, Mayor, but with your permission, I think a comment, certainly. After the several years of the challenges that we've been faced with, I just want not only the executive staff and the appointments, but every employee that works for this city that is sacrificed to keep us where we need to be. Councilman Coffin mentioned, other cities in a previous slide in regards to where they're at and where they're going and where we're going. And I just want, Mayor, and council members, I want folks to recognize that I certainly as a council member, I think the rest of us do as well, recognize the challenges that each department has faced, that each employee has faced, even the part-timers. We certainly have done our part, I believe, in trying to do what we need to do and lead and by example. But I want to also recognize, Betsy, your terrific executive team, Mr. Vincent and finances and everybody else that's been part of this. But it hasn't just been us or you, it's been every employee that works for this city. And I think it's cognizant that and important that we recognize all of their efforts as well as we continue to deal with this. Because looking at 14's forecast, we're still not done. We still have a lot of work to do, and we have to figure out how we close that gap. And Ms. Falger, it's important that you note that because we've approved budgets that were in the red and we've closed that gap, I think that just is it tells of how well we're doing and how well we as a city in this state are operating despite our economic conditions right now. So just a big thank you to everybody. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. I know we concur in that praise. Well earned, very difficult. And looking ahead, I hope sometime in the beginning of 2013 that you've looked ahead to 2014 and we've seen improvements rather than this hard hit that it looks like it's going to be.
And we will keep this council up to date on all the changes that we have or we see.
Wonderful. I see Councilman Anthony out of the corner of my eye.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, when we talk about budgets, it's mostly about numbers and figuring, you know, debt and those sorts of things. But I think what's important here is how we came about to coming where we are today, and it's about the strategic planning retreat that we had. And you know, we started off by talking to our employees and talking to the community about what their priorities were, getting us together, all the directors together, and sitting down and first deciding what's our vision, our mission statement, what are our strategic priorities, and that's how we fund it. We don't just throw money up against the wall and kind of see where it sticks. So, I mean, we're funding, trying to attract businesses to the city of Las Vegas and helping the businesses that are here. We're funding a safe city. I mean, we're opening up fire stations. I mean, that's pretty amazing at this particular time. We're making sure Metro's funded, so we have police officers out there that are protecting our community. We're being fiscally responsible. I mean, when I came on 2.5 years ago, I mean, it was it was doom and gloom, and you know, how we're going to get there. And today we have a pretty good budget here, and we've made some drastic cuts, and there's been a lot of people that have been working on it. You know, community pride. I mean, we want to spend money to make sure that people are proud of living in the city of Las Vegas. And you know, I drive around just my ward. The mayor and I were at the opening of the Western Little League, and the parks were gorgeous, and the kids out there were just so happy to be in the park. I drive by Betty Wilson Park on a weekend. There are thousands of kids out there enjoying our park and exercising, having a great time, and I'm sure every single other ward is seeing the same things. But we're spending money to make sure that continues that way. You know, spending money on technology to make sure that we have the best customer service, being more web-based, those sorts of things, and you know, spending money to make sure that we have the best organization, the best city in the country. So that's what we kind of tend to lose sight of when we're looking at, you know, $1 million here and $10 million here and those sorts of things. We're doing things very strategic, very focused, and making sure we are spending money exactly where it needs to be to make Las Vegas a great place to live. And yesterday I was at the Las Vegas Perspective, and the discussions there's good news out there. We're starting to see an uptick. We're starting to see tourists come back. We're starting to see people going to restaurants and buying things, which causes sales tax to come up. It's the good news. Things are going to start to get better, and I think we're at a point where there's some exciting things happening in downtown Las Vegas. I love living in Las Vegas. It's a great place to live, and these are the kind of things that make it that way, spending money where it is supposed to be spent based on our overall discussion and engaging the community. So I think we're in a pretty good spot. Thank you.
Thank you. And the beauty is, you know, the development services now that are all in one spot, so that one-stop shopping can happen, that we're online so much. It's so exciting to see the growth and stability, to see things like Tivoli Village out in the Northwest, and to see the growth. And here there's a slow in the foreclosures, and we will get a handle on it. It's a great time to be living in the rebirth of Las Vegas, and so much of it has to do with having the courage to put the money in the right places. There are no better parks in this country. Park after park, and I take my hat off to Mr. Harsons, his whole group, Larry Hognes, have worked so hard and take such pride. And then to see that we're going to be able to allocate part-time care over the weekends. I mean, we're enjoying this. Everything's being done for us, the residents, and it's a great time to be part of that. And thank you for this wonderful work, all of you. I couldn't echo my fellow council persons more. It's a great city, and it's only because we're working together as one to make it happen. So thank you. Please proceed.
Well, at the risk of putting you to sleep with more numbers, let's just go through a few more. I want to give you some statistics on what this budget would represent. 54% of what you would approve is for wages and benefits in the general fund. 17% for non-labor expenditures. 26% of the general fund budget would be allocated to Metro, and 2% for debt service and other items. That would make a total of 67% of the general fund budget would be for public safety, focused on public safety.
Madam Mayor, going through you, would you repeat those figures, please? It was 54% went to
Salaries and benefits,
salaries and benefits,
17% non-labor expenditures, those are the services and supplies that the general fund uses to support its programs. Metropolitan Police Department, 26%, and 2% is other, whether it be transfers or debt service.
thank you.
So with that, just a brief history. I know you've all seen this slide many times. We update it and bring it back, but it's the consolidated tax. Consolidated tax represents 50% of our revenue stream, and as you could see, the green bars are the history that we have actuals on. We're projecting 12, a gold bar on the right, and then 13. We're projecting the 4.6 in consolidated tax slightly down in percentage growth from 12, but the total dollar value would be going up.
What is that based on? Why are you projecting it down?
We're projecting the growth down, the percentage growth down, just on the trending we've seen. If it comes in more, we'll be reporting that to you as we experience it each quarter.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I just want to remind you that a lot of the revenue projections that we use are actually reviewed by some outside experts, financial outside experts, and they were the ones who urged us a little caution in this area of the sales tax growth.
Was there, I mean, knowing what is going on at the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority and their report on tourism and everything else, was there any particular reason that they said be cautious?
Well,
that they told
there
you?
were quite a number of discussions that have been had over the last 3 or 4 months about this, and we actually were starting with a little bit lower number when we last gave you a forecast, and we've ratcheted that up just slightly. But because this is a highly elastic, very volatile source for us, we'd rather be conservative in its projection, particularly in light of the fact that we're not sure where the property tax is going to land because we haven't seen the appeals numbers in. So we're being somewhat cautious, and I don't know if Mark wants to chime in, but I think we're kind of on the mark, and if it performs better, then we will deal with that. That's a good problem to have.
Would it be all right, Mr. Vincent, if you explain what the appeals means, please? What this is that's hanging out there?
Sure, I could give it a shot. We already have the assessed value numbers from taxation and the assessor, but they're pre-appeals. And so before I explain that, that number as it sits right now is a 6% drop. And so in our forecast here, we're predicting a 10% drop. So the other 4% drop would be the results of property owners who would have the right to appeal their tax bill. Once they get that notice in December of their assessed value, they have a right to appeal, and there's a process by which they can go through that, which has not been concluded yet. And so as a placeholder right now, we're using, I think, a value of appeals that's pretty much the same or consistent with what happened last year, although some of the ancillary information we have, we're thinking that appeals might not actually be that bad. So we'll just have to wait and see how they finally shake out. But there is a process that there's a Board of Equalization in each county that hears these appeals, and you can actually watch them on TV. They're very painful to watch. It's even worse than this budget presentation. A lot of number crunching and talk of stuff. And so anyway, there's a process they go through, and we won't know the results of that
Thank you.
Maybe another month or so.
We'll have 2 months more experience to bring to you at the budget hearing to see if we need to uptick those projections at all. The next slide is the property tax. The property tax is currently about 19% of general fund revenue. As you can see, we hit our stride in 2009 as the highest point, and it's been declining. We are really optimistic that even though we are projecting a 10% decline in 2013, that this will be the bottom before it starts to level and move in an upward position next year. The last slide I have for you is budget policies. I do not have the whole list of budget policies here for your review at this time. We'll bring them to the budget hearing, but I wanted to point out a couple of them. Under positions and personnel, we have two policies. One that states budgets will be reflected the full expected cost for personnel costs. The second one, all positions will be fully funded. As positions become vacant, they're pooled and controlled by management. These two are slightly in conflict, even though they're both our budget policies. I really want to focus on the first bullet, that this budget that we've developed and brought to you today reflects our full expected costs that we're going to have in fiscal year 13. We have not budgeted 100% of all positions, vacant or not. We've based it on what our experience is for the last 15 years of what we've underrun and what our attrition is and our rollover, but we were very comfortable with the budget level that we're bringing you. So we will refine these two policies and bring you a full set at the budget hearing of what we're actually doing. Because the second bullet, if you'll remember, we had taken the practice of when positions came vacant in the past 2 years, we would take those vacant positions and move them out of the departments and put them in a pool to kind of control this pool. We've eliminated that practice, and we're actually having them back in the departments where they were vacated from. However, we still have a very formal position review with the chiefs over their departments on whether those positions will be filled or not, or need to be reallocated to a higher priority. Under debt service, we currently do not have a policy that deals with any debt service reserve. We'd like to establish a reserve and a reserve level. We'll be working on that in the next 2 months, and we'll bring that forward to you for your consideration on May 15th. With that, that would conclude my presentation. I'd like to take any guidance you have or answer any questions.
We have some more questions, please.
Please.
Mayor Pro Tem Anthony.
The one slide where you have the $25 million for strategic capital programs, and then you have $13.5 million to retire the Neonopolis garage debt. Is that reflected in the $464 million budget, or is that on top of that?
No, if you will see, I've got the slide up with the $464 million. $464 million is the operating expenditures in the general fund. It brings us down to a shortfall of $10 million, draws down the general fund balance to $72 million. The line below that reflects $11.5 million in the fiscal stabilization fund. If you see to the left of that, we started with the $50 million in the fiscal stabilization. We're going to draw down the 25. We're going to pay off the Neonopolis debt. That's what draws the 50 down to 11.5 million.
Okay. And the other thing is the $25 million for capital projects. I mean, that's pretty significant. We're going to be putting in $25 million into the community to build stuff. I know we saw that list in our briefing. Are we going to make that public? Are we posting that today to make it public, or is that at a later date?
No, actually, we're still refining that list, but you can see the high-level description of what's in that list in the earlier slides as it relates to your strategic priorities. And what we will do is we'll do a project summary. We just haven't completed that work yet. That's ordinarily something we do leading up to the final budget adoption.
Okay.
But what we wanted to get was direction to go ahead and plan for the $25 million drawdown today, so that we know we need to do that work. If we don't need to do that work, then we don't need to spend time doing it.
And then later on in the process, we'll identify the actual capital projects.
Yes, that's actually a part of your formal approval on the 15th, a list of projects for your 5-year capital plan that's submitted to the state.
Thank you.
Councilman Coffin?
Your Honor, on that same subject, on the list of requests, capital budget requests, you want to make sure that I see all the ones that were submitted by your department heads. You know what I'm saying is on that $25 million capital list that we're going to see.
Absolutely, Councilman. You also asked, we're going to work with those departments that made the request. to get the work scope or what the project definition is so that you know what's intended for that project.
Yeah, there's
instead
several
of just
reasons
the
for
one
this
line.
kind of request. It's not to undercut management's choices over what it might have decided was more necessary in the big picture. But in essence, what wasn't chosen might be a deferral of an expense. I'd like to kind of know how obviously, we had to pile up some deferred capital in order to get the money to get through the last few years, according to our presentation today. Well, sometimes it just keeps growing. You can't help it. It's going to continue to grow, but I really want to see where all the deferral is. We got things that are falling apart around town that we're going to have to spend money on when we do have money. We really want to see how that whole list looks.
Yes, sir. We're going to put the whole book together
Okay.
for your review and consideration.
This is my first budget here. I'll get the hang of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Are those at all prioritized? I know you submitted a list to us earlier. I don't know if they were inclusive, but are they at all prioritized?
Right now, they're not prioritized, although I will tell you this, that many of the things that are on the list are leveraged funding, meaning if we chose not to do them or not to fund them, we would probably avoid the ability to get federal or state or RTC funding, for instance. So we will describe all of that in the package for you that we will brief you on leading up to the final budget adoption.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Candace. Any other questions, Councilman or Council Lady? None? Councilman Ross, Councilman Coffin? You're so far away. Good to go. So I would entertain a motion to accept the tentative budget for fiscal year 2013.
And Madam Mayor,
Yes,
as you
ma'am.
make that motion, I'd just like to emphasize that for the public, that this tentative budget can be changed. That's what tentative means, so it's not set in stone. It's something that we're doing now to make the first step. Thank you.
Thank you. Good explanation. Okay, may I have a motion, someone, please?
What you said is my motion.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion to accept the tentative fiscal year 2013 budget, tentative budget. Please vote. And please post. Oh, isn't that cute, the way it flashes in and out? Thank you very much, Candace, your department, everyone, Mr. Vincent, Ms. Fretwell, everybody. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Council.
much. And so, citizen participation and public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the City Council. No subject may be acted upon by the City Council unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, please come to the podium and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on any single subject, as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed, may be limited. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak under this portion of the agenda? Seeing and hearing none. This special City Council meeting is adjourned, and thank you all. Great, thank you. Thank you. And Mrs. Clerk, I will have that list for you as soon as I get upstairs.